Hello all and good afternoon, Lottie here from the Juror Society. So pleased for you to all join us. I'm going to be in conversation with Sam from the divorce surgery. Just going to be getting her in now. Hope you're all as excited as I am for this conversation. We've got lots to explore and I'm just going to invite her in now. So if anybody's got any questions they would like to ask, your questions in the chat below, and as Sam and I are talking, we will all get a chance to ask as many questions as possible. Hello Sam, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. Nice to see you.
Lovely to see you. Sorry we had to schedule this a little bit later than expected, but it's life. And I think, how have you been? And what we're starting on with this conversation, I was just giving a bit of a background before we started about how we're going to be discussing divorce and the new ways of divorce and how to make it more amicable, less litigious, is that the word that you would use, and more collaborative, I guess. So Samantha, thank you so much for being here, and do you want to give us a little bit of background on yourself and your mission with the divorce surgery?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. So I'm a family law barrister, have been for about 16, 17 years now, and always advised, one side or other, one spouse or other on the arrangements for their children or the division of their finances on divorce. And if they couldn't settle, then I'd represent them in court. And about 6 years ago, a couple approached me direct and said, actually, we don't want like a lawyer each. We don't want a fight. We just want to know what's fair. Can you advise us together? And at the time, nobody offered that in England and Wales because we all thought we couldn't. But it turns out that we can. So I did quite a lot of research looking at other countries where this is completely normal to share a lawyer on divorce, and got regulated. And since 2018, I've been running the divorce surgery with another barrister called Harry Gates. And it's been super successful. And now the model is being rolled out. There's lots of different law firms also offering the opportunity for couples to share a lawyer, because fundamentally, most people approaching divorce aren't looking for a really expensive court battle. What they want is fairness, and they'll have very different perceptions of fairness, and that's completely normal. But what you don't want to do is drive division. What you really want to say is, okay, well, let's look at this objectively and get you an expert view as to where fairness lies.
Yeah, and I think that word fairness is something that is so overlooked, because I think when people think of divorce, they think of fights. They think, this is going to be really, a division, but not in that fair way, but in a battle. I need to have my team, you have your team, I'm going to get what I want and you're going to get what you want. But I think the approach that you're taking is just so needed and so much more human, and less traumatic for everybody involved, because it's never just the two parties as well. You've always got the overflow of the impact that it has on children, of the rest of your family as well. And so going back to that cost part, and aren't lawyer fees extortionately expensive? What are your views on that, and how can you help to address that through the service you're offering?
Yeah, so they can be really expensive. I mean, I think what I'd say, just a tiny point on what you were saying before, this view that it has to be a battle. And I think what most people don't realise is that if you end up going before a judge, what they have to ascertain is what's fair. And that's what the law is designed to help with. So actually, all this big legal process and adversarial system is all just there, designed to find out what fairness is. And so when you see that that's your overall aim, you're like, actually, the problem is the process. So it's about how we get people to a place where they know what's fair. And that links in with costs. So costs can be completely astronomical in family law cases. And it's sadly not surprising to get reported cases where people are spending 38, 42% of their net assets just on the legal fees in resolving their divorce, which is just unbelievable. There was one case called Crowther where they spent 300% of their net assets. They spent 3 times more than they had in legal fees fighting about what they had. It was bonkers. But the reason that it can get completely out of control is that divorce is a massive emotional change. It's a massive life change, and it brings up really raw emotions, understandably, always. Now, if you start a legal process feeling very emotionally charged, the only place you can channel those emotions is through the legal process. And so you end up thinking, oh, this is just too awful. I don't want to talk to her or him. I'm just going to let the lawyers do everything.
Mm-hmm.
So then on an hourly rate billing, your lawyers are doing the basic job of your communication between you for you. Inevitably, because you're not talking, mistrust can build, right? So you feel further and further apart, and suddenly you're in a legal process where nobody can give you any guarantee as to when it's going to end, and you can't control the costs. So that's how they escalate. So what we did to try and change that is that, Harry and I were so lucky we had a blank sheet of paper because we were designing a whole new process. So we thought, right, what's everything we hate about the current system? And one of the things was obviously the conflict, but the two other things were time and cost. So the average divorce in England and Wales takes 14 months. So that's over a year, right? When you're in conflict, when you've got uncertainty about your future, that's far too long. So we've made a streamlined process which lasts for about 8 to 10 weeks. And the other thing was cost, right? You would never go into any other major life change. You can imagine if you were doing a kitchen extension and the builder said, right, well, this is my hourly rate and I don't know how many hours, you'd never
agree to
it. No. So we thought, we've got this streamlined process. We can work out and we can take the risk on ourselves of, what are the issues going to be? What seniority of barrister does this couple need? How long do we think it's going to take? And then we give them a fixed fee before they commit, and we stick to that come what may. So it means that people can budget for divorce. And again, it's something that is quite slowly taking off, but it's what the consumer wants. And ultimately, family lawyers run businesses. So if enough people are saying, you know what, we want to share a lawyer, we want fixed fee, this is going to become commonplace.
Well, exactly. And I think it really ties into no fault divorce now that, these barriers for having somebody getting out of a relationship that just isn't working for them and now, dissolving. So you've got the no fault divorce, and then you've got services like yours where actually they know how much it's going to cost. They know that it's going to be, a lot more streamlined, cost effective and shorter time frame, because it does take an emotional toll on you and a financial one. So you want to know, okay, this time in my life is allocated to sorting out our divorce.
Yeah.
And then in 6 months' time we're going to be out the other side, rather than this never-ending rabbit hole of more problems, more fees, more time, more stress, which can happen very easily when you've lost control in the battle.
And it is a legal process, so you do want legal advice, but what you don't want is people to be scared of getting it because they think by getting it they're going to be channeled into some really expensive or big drawn out battle, or because they think they're priced out of expertise. That's just unacceptable. And the reality is that provided you can get the financial disclosure together, a barrister or solicitor can look at the facts of your case and give you a really detailed analysis of what the law is. And the thing that's really important, I think, as well, is that, as I was saying before, divorce brings so many emotions to the fore, right? A lawyer is the least experienced and most expensive therapist you could ever have. Now, if you've got a limited budget and you think, okay, well, I know I'm only spending this much on legal fees, then suddenly you've got budget, you've got headspace to think, do we need to have a separation counsellor? Do we need some co-parenting help to help us get the kids through this? Do I need a bit of a life coach or just a couple of sessions with someone to reboot myself? Do we need some financial advice? Let's get some pensions advice. Suddenly all of those things seem manageable because you've kind of kept the legal bit in its box, which is where it should be, rather than the legal process consuming you, which is what can happen.
Yeah, I suppose using your lawyer as a negotiator and a communicator is not effective and probably doesn't help, because I think when people go through really litigious, is that the word, litigious?
Yeah.
Divorce, when they come out the other side, because they haven't been communicating, then you have this stalemate. And I think when you've got children involved, especially if they've gone through that, they've been communicating through their lawyers, the lawyers are like, right, now you've got your divorce, then they go off. If they're then not able to co-parent effectively, that is something that is a shadow that is looming after that whole process, as you say. So having something where you are more aware of the fairness going in from the start of the course. It's not going into, right, I'm picking this lawyer because I think they're going to be good against this lawyer, and building that army around you, having it as a, look, these are what our finite resources are, let's divide them fairly for everybody. Let's go speak to Samantha, let's see what they can do to make the legal process the least of their worries, almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when it comes to arrangements for children, like you were saying, people could feel there's so much stigma around divorce. There's such a kind of failure narrative around divorce. And the reality is we're all just living a really long time, and you change when you grow. And it's completely fine to say we've had a super successful relationship that's had a shelf life. And for some people, they're going to have 2 or 3 successful relationships during their lives. And all the research shows that it's not divorce in itself that's damaging for children, it's conflict. So really what your priority needs to be is, this is going to be hard, divorce is hard, change is hard. But what we don't want is a prolonged period of time where we're in conflict with each other. So as soon as we can, let's get to a place where at least we both understand what's legally fair, what's legally likely, so we can start talking constructively, because that's where people really get lost in the process. And it is when they're, prolonged periods of time where they're not sleeping, they're stressed about money, where am I going to live? How am I going to support myself? Do I need to go back to work? Do I need to get a better job? What's happening with the children? What are we saying to the children? I mean, massive questions. And so the sooner that you can get them to a space where they know some constructive answers to all of those things, you can start planning, you can start processing it. And you're not constantly living in a state of heightened anxiety. And that's why, we've got so much better at talking about mental health. But for me, mental health and divorce are completely linked. 60% of people going through divorce report mental health issues. So we need to get much better at being open about talking about divorce, about normalizing it, about being like, oh, okay, you're getting divorced. Oh, okay, you're changing jobs. Oh, okay, you're moving house. There will be stressful aspects to this. And I am, as a friend, I'm here to support you. But I'm not going to treat this like the worst thing that's ever happened to you, because it's leaving a relationship by its nature that hasn't been making you happy. So, let's focus on it that way. This is a transition. It's not a catastrophic disaster, I think.
Exactly. And I like that, well, having it as, it's just it's a time period of your life, and it's a restart, and you're going out the other side, and now you can do whatever you want to do finally. Some people.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I love that. And also, okay, I think it's quite helpful for maybe some people who aren't that familiar with divorce. There's 2 parts of it. So you've got the process. I don't know if you can explain how it works in terms of the process of actually the legal separation, and then you've got the finance bit as well.
Yeah, of course. So
For the
there's 3 things really to navigate if you're married and wanting to get divorced. The first is the divorce application. So that really, all that does is change your legal status from married to divorced. And that's the bit that's had the no fault divorce change. So essentially it's an online application that you need to submit. You can even jointly apply now, which I think is a really nice change. And you're just saying our marriage is irretrievably broken down. We don't need to give any reasons. We don't want to be divorced. We don't want to be married anymore. That's not the thing actually that people normally end up in court fighting about. The 2 other things can be. So the second legal part of it is your finances. So division of your finances. I think something that's really important for people to know is that it's not just about you 2 agreeing what you think the outcome is. And it can be hard to agree. It's completely normal not to agree. It's complex. The law is hard. It's not 50-50 in most cases because there's so many different circumstances. But once you've got to a place where you've reached agreement, that's not the end of the story, because you obviously want that to be binding on you both for the long term, forever. So you need a court order to endorse it. Now, a judge won't just rubber stamp something you've agreed. They have to do an objective assessment. They have to look at your finances, a summary of your finances. They have to look at the net effect of the agreement, and they have to decide that it's fair and that your needs are met. So again, it goes back to that point of actually the sooner you can know what a judge would think of as fair, then the sooner you know you're negotiating within a parameter that's likely to be approved. Because there's nothing more frustrating, and it does happen to couples, where they'll submit an agreement that they think is great and a judge rejects it.
How
So that's the
funny.
finances. And then the third thing is arrangements for children, if you've got children. And there it's completely the opposite. So the court's starting point is the best people to make decisions about their children are their parents. Courts will not intervene unless you want them to. So you've got no need to have anything in writing if you can agree the arrangements for your children. Now, what lots of couples do and are really helpful are set out their agreements or their arrangements in a parenting plan, which includes kind of the usual stuff about, how they're going to manage their children's time between them, but also, some people go for a monthly coffee check-in. They think about how they're going to sort out holidays, illness, school choices in the future, so you can get lawyers or mediators, to help you with that kind of document. For some couples, they do want a court order, actually, because maybe they've had issues in the past. And again, if you agree, you can get a court order drawn up, and that can be endorsed by a judge. But you don't need to go near a courtroom if you can reach an agreement about your children. And actually, if you can reach agreement on finances, you never need to step foot in the courtroom. You can just send in your agreement and get them to convert it into a court order.
That's amazing. Thank you. Really helpful summary. And then also this really ties in nicely to resources. Where do people go? What do people, need to know? What don't they need to know? And this fantastic new book that you've brought out, which will tie all of that together. So tell us about your new book.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So Harry and I wrote a book called unimaginatively The Divorce Surgery, but the subtitle is The Art of Untying the Knot. And the reason we wrote it was because it felt like there were a lot of people, celebrities like Gwyneth Paltrow, or kind of mental health professionals or psychotherapists, who were telling people, don't treat divorce as a battle. It's got, really damaging impacts on your mental health if you do. But no lawyers were saying that. And I think the mainstream view has remained, actually, that if you don't kind of lawyer up, if you don't treat this as a battle, then there's going to be some tactical game and you'll be outmaneuvered. And so it really felt important, kind of as barristers, to set out in a book, actually, that's just not right. And the best way to do this is to work together. And this is how we think you should do it. So we did a kind of 10-step plan in the book of how we'd want couples to approach divorce, really. And one of the chapters is all about resources and help. And I think one of the things that I always say to people is, please don't think the first person you call should be a lawyer. It really shouldn't. The first thing you need to do, unless you're in a position where your safety is at risk, the first thing you need to do is think, right, what emotional support do I need? Crikey, how are we coming to terms with this? As a couple, as an individual, do we need some separation counselling? If you've got children, they're extremely perceptive. So getting some help, even just one session with a co-parenting expert, thinking, how are we going to communicate this to the children? What are our answers to their questions? So that you both kind of present a united front as parents when you're talking about it to your children. Then financial advice. For most couples, there'll be one person who knows more about one aspect of the finances or all aspects of the finances than the other. You need to empower you both, so you both have a common understanding about the finances, because otherwise that can be a massive source of conflict. So it's about thinking, right, let's find an independent financial advisor, not one that one of us knows really well, to sit down with us both together, to talk us through everything we've got. What are the tax implications of everything? Where are we at? What's our budget? What do we actually spend each month? What would it look like going forward if we had two homes? What would those budgets need to be? All those sorts of conversations should be happening really before you then think, okay, we've got the basic building blocks here. let's get some legal advice. And we kind of know actually the areas where we're not agreed. Let's get some legal advice on that. And I think that's the other bit I'd say, is that it is completely normal not to agree. So you shouldn't think, oh, we're getting divorced and now we can't agree on selling the house, or we can't agree on the pension, or we can't agree on the children, therefore we are destined to a long-term battle. Nobody agrees. You're getting divorced.
Oh.
You know, you've got different life perspectives. It's completely normal not to agree. The issue you've got to think about is, how are we going to resolve this disagreement? Are we going to let, you know, a kind of two-sided process take over and ultimately a stranger impose a decision on us? Or are we going to take charge of this disagreement and own it and say, yeah, we totally disagree on these 5 things.
Yeah.
Let's get expertise in and make it their problem to tell us what they think the answer should be and why. You know, and it is that control point. It's like, don't be a passenger in this divorce, you know, manage it, own it, you know, and then you can budget it too.
Well, yeah, they say, what is it? Compromises where neither party is satisfied. So,
yeah. And judges say that all the time. And it's always, you know, the crestfallen look on your client's face at the end of a really expensive 4-day final hearing, when the judge says, well, I know I'm doing my job right if you both leave unhappy. Yeah. So, yeah.
But it's like, what did you want? The divorce or the house? And then you have to decide what the process is to make sure that you have got what you would like, and then have a plan for what you really want as well, because once you're out there as well, you can start rebuilding things on your own terms, which I think is something that people forget, is that actually life does go on and you still have options afterwards, and what is agreed then, you know, you're going to be veering off, and you might change what you want anyway. You might decide to move to Ibiza and, you know, relive your youth again. Who knows?
And the thing is that actually the main objective really is, through the process, is trying, and it's really hard because you are trying to rebuild your own life, but is also focusing on, we need to work out a plan that works for both of us, that's fair to both of us. Because you're running a fool's errand if you just focus on your own priorities. And unfortunately, that's what the adversarial process encourages. It encourages you to pitch each of your cases at their highest, knowing that you're going to have to negotiate down. And, you know, but that's a terrible place to start, because it's ensuring you're both going to be crushingly disappointed at the end. Whereas if you start from the place of like, right, well, we've got a finite pool of money here. We can work out what that is with some help, and we now need to run 2 households. You know, how are we going to do that? How are we going to manage it? Let's look at mortgage capacities. You know, it suddenly actually doesn't become, it's maths, you know, and you know, there's always complicating factors, and you know, money that people have brought in through inheritance, or money that's been built up since separation, or people who've given up careers. You know, there's always different circumstances that need to be taken into account, and you should get legal advice for that. But once you've got the legal advice, you'll then know where you stand. But I always say to people, if you think of yourself as a family judge, just look at it like a judge would, and suddenly it's taking away that kind of need to argue each side. We're actually just trying to find something that works for everybody.
I love that approach. I love your approach. Like, you know, more of you, please. But I'm very conscious of time now, so I don't know if you want to wrap up with sort of your 3 top tips for a good divorce, and then I will share all of the information of where people can find you and your book, and much more as well.
Okay, 3. Okay, so my number 1 would be communicate. It's really hard. Okay, it's really awkward and difficult and emotional, and it's so much easier not to. But the minute that you stop communicating, you will start thinking the worst of each other, right? You'll start reading in to each other's motivations. This is the time when you need to communicate the most, because you'll be second guessing each other, and it's so easy. And you know, clients often say to me, you know, she's not the person I thought she was, or he's not the person I thought they were. And you just think, actually what's happening is a chasm is developing because you're not communicating. So keep communicating. Set a budget for your divorce, because that will really focus your mind. You know, if you've got a budget from the get-go and you say, this is how much we're prepared to spend between the 2 of us on lawyers, on pension advisors, on co-parenting, and then you can go to lawyers and say, this is the budget. Are you going to be able to guarantee you can stick to that? And if not, we're going to shop around.
Yeah.
And then I guess
Yeah.
the third thing I would say, and this is what we try and talk about a lot about in the book, is just don't feel like a failure or allow this kind of stigma to attach. You're going to have this amazing new adventure coming now, and this can be a successful relationship that ended. So don't allow other people's views, to negatively influence you, and know that you can kind of control their views too. It was funny when we set up the divorce surgery, we did it because we wanted people to share a lawyer, right, on divorce. But actually, as it's grown, we've realized that what we do is we give couples a really easy narrative from the beginning, because if they can say to friends and their children and their parents and the other parents on the school gate, actually guys, there's really no drama, we're even sharing a lawyer, it just completely dissipates it, right?
Yeah.
If you're not thinking of it as a drama, they're not, and the sooner that you're not the soap opera for the people around you, the sooner you can move on.
And it normalizes it.
Yeah, just normalize it. And it is normal. I mean, 42% of marriages end in divorce. It is normal, but the way we treat it isn't normal. So yeah, the more, just don't feel bad, and it's tough. It's hard emotionally. It really is. But don't let kind of guilt and shame override that, because they're just such unhelpful emotions.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Samantha.
Pleasure.
Lovely to speak with you as always, and I'll be sure to circulate this with as many people as possible along with your book. Thank you again. Have a lovely...
Thanks for having me, Lottie.
So good to see you.
Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.